So, I mean, it sounds like, husband's freaking out about it. Wife is also freaking out about it. She feels guilty.
Yeah.
And why does she feel guilty?
Because she feels like she's expected to feel something that she's not feeling right now for her husband.
Welcome to Making Polyamory Work. Hi, I'm Libby Sinback, and I want to thank you for being with me today. I'm a queer polyamorous mom and a relationship transformation coach, and I'm here to help you if you're feeling stuck, if you're struggling, if you want your relationships to be more nourishing, more functional, more authentic, and full of love. On this show, I go deep into what actually makes polyamorous relationships work, because relationships are at the core of our well-being as humans. I think love is why we're here and how we heal. So, if you listen to the intro, you might have noticed there's another voice on this episode. So, if you're a longtime listener to my show, this episode will be a little different for you. I recorded this episode with a special guest, and in this episode, we together comment and give advice in response to an anonymous post that we found on Reddit together. I had this idea that I'd really like to bring in guests periodically on my show because I have the fortune of knowing so many really brilliant and lovely people, and they have shaped how I think, and I wanted to be able to share their wisdom and perspective with you, just in case you get tired of hearing only my voice on these episodes. Now, if you love the format of my regular episodes, don't worry. I will continue to do those, and if you hate these more conversational podcast formats, feel free to skip this one. I plan on doing these conversations only about once a month or so, and we will for now be using the format of giving advice to anonymous posters on Reddit. And I will link to the original post in the show notes. So, without further ado, here is the first Making Polyamory Work segment of r/Making Polyamory Work. Would you like to introduce yourself, by the way? Because people know who I am, but who are you?
Yeah, I'm Drew. I'm a polyamorous dad. I'm a progressive activist, digital programmer. I am Libby's husband. We've been married for about 8 years, and I am partner to Kier. We've been together almost 3 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start this off with a post that you found, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's on Reddit, and since you found it, I'm going to read it. And by the way, we'll have a link to each of the Reddit threads in the show notes if you want to look and see what other people's advice was. Now, this post came out about a month ago, and here's what it says. It says, "Hi guys, just need to get this off my chest and ask for some advice for me, a mono husband with a poly wife. For some context, so my wife and I have been together for 6 years, married for 4. About 6 months ago, she said that she feels like she's always been poly, but didn't want to try it due to the stigma, etc. Eventually, after many tears from both of us, we agreed that she can see someone else on the side, with both of us having completely open and honest communication about anything that happens. She said she won't tell me anything about them that I don't want to hear, and they won't do anything that I'm not comfortable with. He remains a completely separate entity from our marriage. After many failed dates, she has found another guy who, from what I've gathered, is very respectful of us and knows his boundaries." Knows his boundaries? Okay. Well, we'll get there. "While I'm still not at all okay with her being romantically involved with someone else, she has been nothing but reassuring, and I am trying my best to understand her point of view and accept it. She and I are currently both receiving counseling to help us through this, since we both take our marriage very seriously. While all of this is very emotionally draining, we both feel as though I have become a better husband, and she has told me that she is grateful and thankful I haven't left her, and that I am letting her be herself. She still is and always has been an affectionate and loving wife who has never failed to make me feel secure, wanted, and loved. However, a couple of days ago we encountered a new hurdle. She had a panic attack which was triggered by the fact that because her relationship with the other guy is still new, it's more exciting than ours, and she wants to spend more time with him. She described it as our marriage being a slow-burning fire that is well-established and sustaining, while this new relationship is like a brighter, bigger bonfire that she is more attracted to. She feels guilty about this because she doesn't want to feel that way, since it is me she wants to start a family with and grow old with. However, hearing this just feeds into my greatest fear of her leaving me because she doesn't love me anymore. So my questions are, what are some ways a mono husband can deal with this whole poly situation? How do I deal with the jealousy involved despite my wife's constant reassurance that I don't have to be jealous? And is that phase of wanting more from the other guy just a phase that will eventually iron itself out? Thank you in advance for listening and any advice given. Okay.
Well, first of all, I would say the most likely thing is, yeah, we'll just iron itself all out in some ways.
I'm sure it is all. Well, wait, that's where you're going to start?
Yeah. I mean, that's what this person really, I think, needs to hear and understand is that, like, what she's going through now is
NRE.
It's important, and I think that's what I'll get to later, is it's really important to take it seriously. It is a serious change for her in their relationship. Mm-hmm. It has to be treated as such, but it also is probably not going to define what they say they want, right? Which is a lifelong relationship, which, you know, when she describes, she's worried about the fact that their relationship is a slow burning fire that is well established and sustaining. That sounds like, yeah, exactly what you want for growing old together. You know, in the end, a fast burning fire that has you having panic attacks is probably not where you want to build your life on.
Oh, that's so interesting that you see it that way. I mean, I see it that way too, to a certain extent. It's worth saying, I didn't say this up front, but this couple, they're 25 and 30, so they're younger than us by a decade or more. Yeah, NRE is a temporary state. It can last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years.
Just under 3 years.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I think it can last longer than 2 years under certain circumstances, but for the most part, this NRE has been like scientifically studied, and it has been shown that eventually just the average that it wears off is about 18 months. And this is because if you listen to my podcast episode on NRE, this is a physiological state. Like, it's not just something that you can wish away or think away or anything. It's something that is happening to your body. It is a bombardment of chemicals that your body gets bombarded with, and it wears itself out at a certain point. Like, you just run out of those chemicals, I think. So I guess that's the first thing to say, is that, yeah, it is, you're right, it's a temporary state. And yet, I think when you're 25, which she is, we were just talking about this last night, you know, when you felt that feeling, not very often, you know, when it's still a relatively new feeling to you, I think that can feel you have a different context.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people also have that idea of there's the one, and then when you meet two people who are definitely both the one, then you're like, oh no, there was the two. And then if you keep along that path, like, you end up being like, oh yes, there's the seven riders and the 9 dwarves, or, you know, whatever, or the 9, you know, the you know, and that idea starts to fall apart, right?
Right. Well, and also, I mean, speaking only for myself, I have definitely felt NRE for people that I cannot have an actual sustainable long-term relationship with. Yeah. Like, there are people that I get totally Twitter-pated about, and then, like, I get to know them a little bit, and I'm like, well, I'm still in love with you, but our lives aren't compatible. I think that's an important thing that a lot of people don't really think about when they think about falling in love. They think falling in love is somehow like a ancient primal knowing that tells you that you're compatible with somebody for the rest of your life. And I think those things are completely two totally separate things that can sometimes line up nicely together. You can fall in love with somebody and they're compatible with your life. But I think you can fall in love with people who you can't have a compatibility with.
Well, and that, again, like I'm talking about with her relationship, that needs to be valued too. Like, even if it doesn't last, even if it's not the basis of a long, sustained relationship, it's still valuable. Even if it doesn't, even if it's never doesn't work out, and you just have NRE crushing on somebody, that's a kind of a valuable social interaction that needs to be, you know, understood and thought about, and you can
made space for.
Yeah, you can work it into your vision of what your life is. The one vision is just like, this one thing will take up everything, and it's so unrealistic because it only includes romantic relationships when people think about it, when in reality they have so many other important relationships they're going to have in their life.
Right. So, I mean, if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is that it's important that this be on the palette of things that you get to experience, even in the context of a long-term romantic relationship. And and when you're coloring with that palette, it's enriching your whole life. And that doesn't mean it has to be, it's like if you divorce yourself from this framework of, if I'm in love, then that person has some kind of automatic elevated status in my like overall life plan. If I can just say, oh, this is a wonderful feeling,
Right.
and it enriches my life, and because it enriches my partner's life, maybe it can enrich my life too, or maybe it won't. Maybe I can just like appreciate it, that they're having it and that it's important to them. But that doesn't have to take on any greater meaning. You know, when we're in a long-term relationship with someone, in this case, a marriage, we have sort of expectations, I think, a lot of times about how that's going to go and what that's going to be. And I'm here to tell you, you will be disappointed at some point.
Yeah.
At some point, you will be disappointed, especially if your expectations weren't made explicit. But even if they were, like, even if you made agreements around what you could expect and not expect from your relationship.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have expectations and your expectations will change.
Yeah.
And also, sometimes you'll set expectations, your partner will agree to them, and then what they need is going to change.
Yeah.
I feel like if you can't pivot, then you're going to have problems, right? You're going to have a hard time. I think that I read somewhere this really nice quote, which was just, I mean, you've heard the quote before, like the only constant is change. But long-term relationships, that's especially true. The only thing that's consistent about long-term relationships, I think, is change. And I think that's something you got to accept. And that is part of both the beauty and the challenge of a long-term relationship. You know, she had a panic attack triggered by the fact that her relationship is more exciting. So, I mean, it sounds like, you know, husband's freaking out about it. Wife is also freaking out about it. She feels guilty.
Yeah.
And why does she feel guilty?
Because she feels like she's expected to feel something that she's not feeling right now for her husband.
Oh,
Right?
I don't know. I think that she feels guilty because her husband did not want this.
Oh, yeah.
He's monogamous. She's polyamorous, and she's always wanted to be poly, but didn't want to try it due to the stigma. That's the first thing the husband said. And this is another piece of the thing that can happen in long-term relationships. Sometimes what you think you're getting and what your partner has told you that you're getting turns out to not be what you're getting. He thought he was marrying someone who was monogamous. She kept that under wraps, that she really was polyamorous and she always wanted to be that. And now, after 6 years together, she's like, no, I have to be this. Like, if I'm looking at and I want to just say there's a legitimacy to that also, but I want to get to also why it's complicated. But like, there's a legitimacy to, I realize this is important to me. And when I look at the whole rest of my life, if I'm going to spend the whole rest of my life never fulfilling this part of myself, then I might feel like I'm missing out, like I'm deprived.
Right.
But then the husband, I mean, I can't imagine how that would feel if he was like, I signed, again, to go back to the expectations, I signed up to be with someone who was only going to be with me.
Right.
And now I'm not. That's not what I'm getting anymore. I'm disappointed. I'm not okay. I'm jealous.
Well, it's also their agreement essentially was a don't ask, don't tell.
Is that how you read it? That's interesting.
Well, but she said she
completely open and honest communication about anything that happens.
Yeah, but she doesn't want to tell me anything about them I don't want to hear. They won't do anything I'm not comfortable. He remains completely as a separate entity.
I would describe that as parallel poly.
Right. I myself, I don't, different things work for different people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm always skeptical of the idea that something is going to remain completely separate. And Kira, again, it didn't.
Yeah.
She's definitely having not simply strong feelings for this guy, but it's bringing up insecurities about how she feels in the marriage.
Right.
And guilt. And so that stuff could not be isolated. It could not be fully parallel.
Well, sure. I mean,
because she's a person. The stuff is her. It's going to change her.
Right. Well, and I mean, that's why I've said we aren't these little islands, right? And I think you can operate parallel polyamory, and I think that's possible to a certain extent. But yeah, to have this expectation that what's happening over here isn't going to impact what's happening over there, I think that's an unreasonable...
Why would she be doing it if it wasn't going to? Let's think about some similar cases, right, where couples, they're like, one partner says, I really just need to go and have sex with other people.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I deeply need. Obviously, it was so important to them that they had to bring it up in their marriage and negotiate that. Mm-hmm. And then it happens, and let's say even just best case scenario, now they're getting something that it obviously was really important to them, they really needed, that's going to change life.
I don't like the phrase "really needed." I don't
Sorry.
think, but I understand what you're saying.
It was something that was so important to them, and now they're getting it. Like that, them living a life where now that they're getting that thing means they're going to be living a different life. They'll be possibly a different person. It's going to go back and affect the original relationship.
Again, it's going to change
maybe for the
you.
better.
But it's going to change you.
Yeah.
How many times have we been in situations where, like, we thought we were getting something with each other, and then it wasn't what we thought? I mean, so many times. The thing that I sort of want to pick apart here, I mean, so, yes, NRE is temporary. Yes, they'll probably roll through this. But I worry that this guy is also, that this couple isn't necessarily, I mean, it sounds like they're going to counseling, which, yay.
Yeah. Counseling
is good. Having an outside person support you through this is really good. Hopefully that this person is non-monogamy affirming, so that, because one thing I'm sort of noticing here is sort of a power dynamic between the husband and the wife, where she feels really grateful that he hasn't left her.
Yeah.
And that he's letting her be herself.
Right.
And she's having a panic attack and feeling super guilty because she's falling in love with somebody. That says to me, like, she's really afraid of losing him and that he has a lot of power in this situation. Now, the other complicated thing is he's also in a situation that he'd rather not be in. He's clear that he doesn't feel comfortable with her being in relationships with other people, but he's doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And I want to be the first to say, this comes up a lot in polymono relationships, is, at least a thing that I've seen, is that if the polyamorous person is often feels like empowered to be polyamorous, to act on their polyamory, to be with multiple people, and that the mono person just feels like they have to go along with it. And I think that's not true. I don't think the mono person has to put up with polyamory or the polyamorous person has to put up with monogamy. I don't think there's either position automatically wins, but I think no matter what, one person, no matter which way you go, one person does end up giving up something pretty important to them, Mm-hmm. Like if you're polyamorous and you're with a monogamous person and you choose to only be with them, then you're giving up a big part of what you want to do. But if you're monogamous and you really anticipated being monogamous for the rest of your life, you're giving up something too. Yeah. So if your partner becomes polyamorous. So,
I mean, even just this is very emotionally draining.
Yeah.
Even though it sounds like that they think that's worked out for the better.
Yeah, that it's had some benefits. That he's a better husband.
That is something like you got to sign up to go down that path. I think it's also interesting to think about the fact that she never conceived of it being possible for her being polyamorous, right? And so that's why she never really brought it up. That she felt that stigma, and she thought that stigma would always keep her from considering it as a possibility. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, that wasn't like something she brought to the table that she was hiding from him. She never thought, she never saw a way past that stigma, and then all of a sudden she realized, oh, I could live a life like this, and that stigma is not going to block me. People thought something was never a possibility, and then the world changed, and suddenly it was, and suddenly now that is something on the table between the two of you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why you wouldn't bring something up that you then later have to bring up, And I mean, I think that's, again, there's all kinds of reasons why you might end up partnered with somebody over a long term who then turns out isn't what you thought. And you get to decide at the end of the day, is what I'm getting out of this relationship worth the things that I am not getting that I wanted, or worth dealing with the things that I got that I wasn't expecting. Yeah. We have a ton of that. Like, I could go into the thing about, like, you wanted to have a dog and have the dog sleep in the bed.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, no.
Yeah, that's something that,
Then that's never going to happen. Like, that's, you can have that with Kier. You guys can have a dog together and sleep with that dog in a bed that I don't sleep in.
Yeah.
But that's a no-go for me.
Yeah.
And, I could have compromised on it. I could have said I would try to be with that. But for me, it's a deal breaker. And Drew decided it wasn't a deal breaker for him, that he wanted to stay with me anyway.
I mean, it was something I really enjoyed. I had it in my life at least once. I can look back on it and enjoy that time and remember it. But I can't have... There's big things in life that I can't have all of, right?
Right.
And accepting that, I think, is part of, like, maturing in a relationship.
Right. And then there are times when you think you won't get something, and then years later you do.
Yeah.
And so I think, that's just important to when you have those moments of, I'm disappointed, I didn't get something I was hoping for, go through that reckoning, grieve it, like grieve the loss of the thing that you wanted. Then you got to let it go.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the part that worries me, right? I've said this before, is that I don't think self-sacrifice is a very good love language.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of I give something up and therefore I'm owed something. Or, this kind of transactional way of doing relationships where, like, I'm disappointed in something that I think I would get, and so now you have to be disappointed about something you would get. Like, I'm entitled to disappoint you in some kind of way.
Right.
I think that's something that I would look out for with these folks, and that I would look out for in terms of, like, this NRE. Like, I could see this NRE and this woman being drawn into her new relationship, and the husband, like, guilting her with that and using it to control the relationship she has with this other partner.
Yeah, it changes all the leverage.
Like, I'm doing this with you. I'm allowing this polyamory thing to happen. So, I'm putting limitations in place on the relationship. And, if things get out of hand, then, I might pull the plug on it. And I feel like that's, a lot of people talk about couple privilege and veto power and things like that. And I mean, that does... that kind of stuff seems like it's permeating this post a little bit. The thing that sort of stuck out to me that I kind of called out before is he's very respectful of us and knows his boundaries.
Right.
The way that I took that was he knows what I have told my wife is and isn't okay with him to do with him.
Yeah.
It's good that they've clearly communicated those with him, hopefully, and that he knows that they are going to be the people that grow old together and make kids together or whatever, because that's what they've agreed on.
And hopefully he's down for that.
But that's the thing. Like,
he may not be.
Well, right. And I mean, the thing is, relationships, as we know, grow into things you don't plan on all the time.
Yeah.
And I go both ways on this. Like, I think it's important that relationships be able to grow organically and be able to be what they want to be. And also, as I've said before, there are people that I fall in love with who aren't good, compatible life partnerships for me, right? And if I let the relationship kind of just grow wherever it wanted, it might grow into a place where it's harmful to my life, or it's taking up time that I don't want to be taking up doing things I don't care as much about as the other things I care about. And at the end of the day, you only have so much time, attention, and energy. Like, love is infinite, but those things aren't. And you have to decide to prioritize what's important to you. And so, the other sort of dark side of NRE is that it can cause you to just forget about your priorities and forget about what's important to you.
Yeah.
And you have to stay, if you're the person who's in NRE, you have to remember to stay grounded and focused on what's important to you. And so, if this other relationship is important to the wife, she needs to put the energy into the relationship, into her marriage. Not to keep the husband happy, but because it's important to her. Right. Not to keep the husband unthreatened, but because she cares about this relationship and wants it to last a lifetime.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's also important to say that, like, her desire to spend more time with this other guy, which may last, again, for NRE period, or may lead to something even more transitional to the relationship.
Right.
That desire does not take away that she wants her original relationship, and that she values it in the same way that, like, when we get obsessed with some game on our phones, and spend way too much time doing that, right? That doesn't take away all our deepest values and commitments or anything else.
Well, but on the flip side, if I'm hanging out with you and I'm not giving you any attention because I'm sucked into my phone, you're going to feel neglected, right?
Yeah.
And it's important. And the thing is, the important thing to say there is that I'm going to feel neglected. Yeah. Even though I'm the one doing the neglecting,
right.
I'm going to feel undernourished by the relationship that I'm not giving attention to. And I think that when you're feeling those jealousy feelings, it's worth asking yourself, hey, what is it I'm afraid of? What is it I need right now? Is this a need that I can get met for myself? Am I just wanting, comfort? Maybe I can go get comfort somewhere else. Maybe I can go meditate, whatever. Or am I wanting attention? And do I need to ask my partner for some attention and some care? But the important thing is when you are asking for it, really asking instead of demanding, and feeling entitled, because you're not entitled to attention. You're not entitled to drop of the hat whenever you want it, on-demand care and emotional processing. It always has to be a thing that you're respecting what your partner's doing and then requesting, hey, this is important too.
Yeah, and I think it's important that both you practice those in the moment requests, right, for what I need, but also that you have larger meta conversations about like here like in the moment I feel uncomfortable asking you for this because when I do you snap back or act annoyed
or get defensive.
But in general I want to find a way to ask for your attention when I want, and asked in that different context that might be much easier. And so it's important to have both of those contexts to have that conversation in the immediate and the reflecting.
Yeah, and I guess like, you know, to use the fire analogy, you know, slow burning fire versus, you know, this bright big bonfire. You know, the bright big bonfire is kind of fueling itself, right? Yeah. Whereas the slow burning fire, you have to keep putting fuel on it. There's a certain point where like if you want that fire to stay alive, you have to keep putting wood on it. You have to give it oxygen, and that requires intention. If I were the wife and also the husband, like, and I mean, it sounds like they're doing this, like they're going to counseling. They're being thoughtful about this. Yeah. You know, I just think it's important that they continue to feed that fire, you know, that they continue to take care of it and tend to it and not let this bonfire burn everything up, you know, because I think that's important. But I think that the means of doing that is so important because, I mean, there's so many ways to slip and trip into control, to slip into demands instead of requests, to slip into guilt and trying to control the other relationship as a way of feeling okay. Yeah. And those are all dangerous and traps. And the thing is, I've experienced feeling like even if nobody's asking me to do that, like, I mean, I feel like there were times when you've been threatened by some past relationships of mine. Yeah. And you've never, ever overtly asked me to do anything different in those relationships. You've asked me for consideration to you, like things that you need to feel okay, you know, different kinds of things. Like one time you asked me to text you and just let you know when I was going to sleep. Yeah. You know, and that was a request. It wasn't a demand. And it was just a consideration thing that you asked me for. Yeah. And there were other things like that like you wanted. Like there was a time when you wanted to know if we were seeing each other. Just to know. Just to have that information. You didn't act entitled to it. But like you just wanted to know so that you could kind of mentally be aware of the landscape of things. Yeah. And plan my own schedule and responses. But I mean, even if it wasn't impacting you, you know, like even if we were going to see each other like while you were at work or something, you know, you wanted to know. Like you never said, hey, don't do these things with this partner. Don't do these things, you know, don't see them less. Don't downplay them to me. Like don't try to pretend that it's less than it is. And I think those are all temptations that you can run into when you're in that phase where you're in NRE with somebody and someone else is feeling threatened by that. And I would say really resist downplaying the relationship for sure, because that not only doesn't really protect your partner, it just makes them not feel like they can trust you. Because they can tell, they can usually sense it anyway. But also it's really disrespectful to the other relationship too. Like if you're willing to downplay the love that you're feeling for this new person, you're not willing to celebrate it, you're not willing to acknowledge it to the other people who are close to you, that's going to be hard for that partner to like get the sense of that. But the other thing that you don't want to be tempted to do is to, you know, not do things with your partner because you're afraid it's going to threaten your other partner. You know, like you're afraid that they're going to have a bad reaction or something like that. It doesn't mean you cannot decide to do those things or whatever, but like don't make a decision for your partner to protect them from something that they're not asking for, and that, you know, intentionally limits your relationship without anybody's negotiation around it.
And then you have two relationships, in both of which you're terrified about what's going to happen in the other relationship all the time.
No, they're tempting things. Like there were times when I was like, well, I don't want to hurt anybody, so I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be here. And I've seen people break up with other people that, you know, their partner didn't ask them to do that, but they just felt like it was too hard, you know? And I would just encourage you to be careful about that, because any decisions you make to self-sacrifice in the name of your partner's comfort, when they're not asking you to. Yeah. And also when they're, you know, it's just, that's just going to set you up for resentment down the road, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think a proactive thing that she could do here is acknowledge, I really want to spend more time with this other guy. Yeah. I probably am going to do that. Yeah. And that means I'm going to spend less time with you, my original partner. So, like, like with any relationship challenge, if she got a job that had a lot of travel and I'm going to see a lot less of you, this is going to be a challenge to our relationship. What sorts of things can we do that will make us still feel connected, that will still help us accommodate this change, right?
Yeah.
And naming it first is important. That's the way she can be proactive about prompting him to ask for what he wants.
Yeah.
Without assuming.
Well, and of course, I mean, I don't know if you've had this experience. I've had this experience where, like, if I try to ask somebody about those things, they might be like, well, I don't know what I need, and I'm having a hard time thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I should have to ask for it. That's another trap that people can fall into.
Yeah, you have to ask for it.
Yeah.
And you have to assume that you have to ask for it, because asking for things is a very important skill.
Well, and I mean, it's important not to be mad that your partner might sometimes not have your needs at the front of their brain every second all the time.
Yeah.
And that might be a change if you're used to monogamy, because that might have been the thing that you operated with, especially in your NRE, right? In your NRE, they are in the front of your brain all the time. And so, you might be having a hard time not being in the front of their brain all the time. Yeah, I agree. I think that proactively sort of getting ahead of it and saying, hey, I'm noticing that I want to spend more time with this person. I don't want to just throttle that back automatically. Mm-hmm. Instead, could we talk about how much time you want to spend with me so that I can get a sense of how to balance my time, And notice what I didn't say was, let's talk about how much time I can have with my partner. Yeah. Because let me just say, your time does not belong to your spouse or live-in partner or whomever. Your time only ever belongs to you. And so unless outside of childcare commitments, which I'm noticing these folks don't have kids yet, because childcare commitments, yeah, okay, well, in that case, all your time belongs to your children. But if you don't have children, then your time belongs to you, and you don't have to ask your partner for permission to have a date.
I mean, that's actually a great analogy. That's actually a great other version of that, right? When they have kids, they're gonna have a lot less time for each other. Period.
Shit. Fuck.
So
yeah.
So this is actually in some ways probably good practice for what's going to happen when they have kids.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
How would we sum this up? So the first thing is, yes, NRE is temporary,
but real. And could this what things are at the end of it when the NRE is over? Will not necessarily, and probably will not be, what they started with.
Yeah. So it's transformational, potentially.
Yeah.
But could be a good thing. And it's a palette, it's a color on the palette to work with. And not the end-all be-all of anything. Keep working on your relationship. Keep tending that fire. Get better at explicitly negotiating what you need and want. Be careful not to use your fear to control the other relationship, and don't use your fear of what your partner might feel as a way of controlling your own relationship. Like, don't make decisions about your relationship to protect your partner if they're afraid. And if you're jealous, listen to your jealousy, see what's underneath it, see what needs are there for you, and figure out how to get them met. Make sure you stay with requests rather than demands, and don't feel entitled to anything. And accept that change is the only inevitable thing that's going to come out of any of this. So, be in tune with your expectations. Be ready to be disappointed and move through it, because that's kind of what it takes, I think, to be in a long-term relationship. And then the last thing is, I'd really encourage them to get to a place of clarity around, like, if they're non-monogamous now, if that's the agreement that they've made, then they got to let it go. They got to let go of the guilt.
They have self-sacrifice going both ways, right? He's giving up all this stuff, and it's very upsetting for him, and he's giving that to her to let her have this relationship.
Yeah.
And then she's going back and doing the same thing back. Like, I'm feeling guilty about seeing this guy so much, so I'm sacrificing now my desire to go see this guy.
Well, she hasn't said that she's doing that yet, but she's having a panic attack about it.
Right.
I would be careful not to use that as a currency. I would say, if you've made the agreement that you're going to be disappointed about not being monogamous, if you've accepted that, then accept it and let it go and move on.
Yeah.
If you keep holding it over each other, then again, it's always going to be a point of leverage, and I don't think it's a healthy one. There's just a point where, like, okay, you didn't get what you were hoping for here. You got something else. You got to let it go, or break up. Like, if you really want to be monogamous and that's really what you want to be, then break up and find someone else and be in a monogamous relationship and be set up for other disappointments because they'll just you'll just have different ones.
Thank you for joining me for this very special episode of Making Polyamory Work. I want to know what you think. Did you like it? Did you hate it? I'd love to know what you thought, so please definitely reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. I would also love to know if you want us to keep doing these because I love this idea, but I'd love to know what my listeners think. And if you do want us to keep doing things and you have a great Reddit thread that you would like us to comment on, you can reach out to me and send it to me. You can get to me on my website, libbysinback.com, or on my email at libby@libbysinback.com. And you can also reach out to me via my Facebook page, or you can reach out to me on Instagram. So if you're loving these podcasts, but maybe your relationship could use some more help, this is work that I do with my coaching clients every day. And if you're interested in that, you can set up a free introductory session with me to see if coaching might be a good fit for you. There's a link in the podcast description for you to sign up for one of those intro sessions. You can also get there by going to talktolibby.com. Slots are pretty limited, but keep looking if you don't find a slot right away. Also, if you love this podcast, share it with your friends, your networks, your Facebook groups, your family, your partners, your dog, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And as always, I really appreciate it when people write reviews. I love knowing what you think. It also helps me in the algorithms and iTunes and Stitcher. If I get ratings and reviews, that bumps me up so more people can find the show. So please do that if you feel called to. Otherwise, thank you so much again for being with me today, and I will see you soon.